Welcome back, everybody, to our next deep dive in this series where we are breaking down all 32 teams in the NFL, all counting down to my number one ranked team in my power rankings. And today, we reveal my 20th ranked Carolina Panthers, who for the first time in 3 years do not rank. I think it's 26th coming into the year. This team obviously hoping to kind of be in the mix in the NFC this year, making that big move for Bryce Young, bringing in a bunch of big name staff members. And this is our final NFC South team, which means this team does rank as the best team in the NFC South for me, even if it's tight. And that does put me in the minority. I am lower on the Saints, higher on this Panthers team. So it's going to be a really fun team to break down here. Very much looking forward to it. Before we do get started, if you could do me a huge favor, please do hit that like button down below. I really appreciate it. A lot goes into this series. It's all I have time for this summer, so it's really important to me that these videos do well. And that like really does help me out. It goes a long way towards pushing this video out to NFL fans. It takes just a second, so I appreciate it. Also, do make sure you subscribe if you enjoy the video. You're not going to want to miss any more of these deep dives as we go. And real quick, just wanted to remind you guys, I do have a merchandise store if you want to check it out. If you're looking for other ways to support the channel, that's a fun way to do it right there. Get a little bit of TFG merch in your hands right there. But without further ado, let's dive into the Carolina Panthers. As always, starting by taking a look at this team's offseason, their key departures and additions. And this was a really exciting offseason for the Carolina Panthers as they let their entire coaching staff go. I'm sure there's a couple position coaches that were retained. I didn't do a full, cross analysis of last year's staff and this year's staff, but a lot of new position coaches brought in as well with Frank Reich, with Thomas Brown, the offensive coordinator, with Ejiro Evero. The Matt Rule, Ben McAdoo era just didn't go as well as they had hoped. Steve Wilkes as well took over as the interim head coach last year, did a very good job, but they go a completely different direction. Very excited to break down this coaching staff for this Panthers team because it's an area for this team that I'm very optimistic about and is going to be a sizable reason why I do have the Panthers as the best team in the NFC South. But as far as the roster is concerned, a lot of quarterbacks heading out the door. Sam Darnold, PJ Walker, not even listed is Baker Mayfield, who played, 6 games for this team last year. They're obviously not too worried about it. They went up and got their guy in the draft. One position, though, that is going to probably be worse this year is going to be wide receiver because they did have to include DJ Moore in that trade to go up and get their quarterback in Bryce Young. It's going to open up some question marks with this wide receiver room that we will get to when we get to the roster breakdown portion of the video. But ultimately, if that's the price they had to pay to go get Bryce Young and not mess around and get a franchise quarterback, a year from now, they're not going to miss DJ Moore. That's what they're really hoping there, even if it opens up some question marks. Beyond that was basically kind of upgrading at their losses. They lose Deontay Foreman, but they bring in Miles Sanders. They hope that's going to be an upgrade, even though that might be debatable. But Matt Ioannidis on the interior defensive line played well, but they go interdivision and bring in Shai Tuttle. They lose Miles Hartsfield, who got starting playing time for them at safety last year, but they bring in Von Bell. So, for the most part, other than wide receiver there, they're thinking they upgraded across the board. And it's not like they didn't bring in anybody at wide receiver either. We'll talk about some of these names in just a second. But some of the other insubstantial departures here, Pat Elflein on the interior of the offensive line did have to start some games for them as the Bozeman situation played itself out earlier in the year. Corey Littleton, Damian Wilson, some journeyman linebackers, along with Justin Burris, who had kind of gone by the wayside, who was once upon a time a starter for this team. But when you consider their additions here, it really was a good offseason. We already mentioned the new coaching staff, Bryce Young, Shai Tuttle on the interior D-line, Von Bell, Miles Sanders at running back, but they did some stuff to provide some playmakers for Bryce Young as well. They bring in the veteran Adam Thielen, who should play a lot in the slot this year. DJ Chark at wide receiver. They bring in Jonathan Mingo in the second round of the draft, a receiver out of Ole Miss. and veteran tight end Hayden Hurst, who returns to the Carolina area coming out of South Carolina. So hoping the combination of those players can not necessarily make up for DJ Moore, but compensate a little bit, considering he was a price they had to pay to go get Bryce Young, who I'm very excited to talk about in this video. They had some other smaller additions as well. Andy Dalton as the backup quarterback here, can hold the clipboard, can step in and help them compete if anything happens to Bryce Young. And then they bring in a deep threat in Damiere Byrd, who's going to compete for the roster. Chandler Zavala, a guard out of NC State in the 4th round, a player a lot of people liked, going to be in the mix for this offensive line rotation / group of starters this year, with some question marks there at the guard spot, mostly coming up because Austin Corbett did tear his ACL in the final game of last season. That kind of snuck in and flew under the radar for a lot of people. But on the defense, they bring in a veteran rotational defensive lineman in Deshaun Williams. And then they draft DJ Johnson, big-bodied edge rusher out of Oregon in the 3rd round, an edge group that definitely needs some help. And then Kamu Gruger-Hill, a veteran linebacker, into the 2nd level of the defense, along with yet another safety here, Eric Rowe, and Jamie Robinson out of Florida State in the 5th round. This team has a million safeties, but Rowe and Robinson will be some nice depth there. So, yeah, a really nice offseason as we look at their positional movement, really upgrading at coaching staff, at the quarterback room, bringing in Bryce Young, and even Andy Dalton is probably better than what they had last year, him alone. Tight end, an upgrade, bringing in Hayden Hurst. Interior defensive line, though it's close between Shy Tuttle and Matt Ioannidis, I do view it as an upgrade. And then safety upgraded, going from really a replacement level backup starting out there to adding Von Bell into the mix and getting a full year of Jeremy Chin healthy. The only position that is downgraded is going to be at wide receiver, where they lose that dynamic elite playmaker in DJ Moore and are going with more of a committee approach there that we're going to have to take a look at. But yeah, overall, a really exciting offseason. Anytime a team is aggressive and makes a move to get a franchise-altering quarterback, I just respect the hell out of it. And when this team brought in David Tepper, or when David Tepper acquired this team as the owner, I was optimistic that he was going to be an aggressive owner, someone that wasn't going to settle for averageness, mediocrity. And this offseason was the pinnacle of that, not just with the quarterback, but as we take a look at this staff now, I love what David Tepper did here. Obviously, the aggressiveness to get the quarterback, but having the foresight to say, hey, you know where there's no salary cap? With the coaching staff. And he just balls out to get like a super team as far as the staff is concerned. Of course, it's going to be headlined by these 3 names here with Frank Reich, Thomas Brown, and Ejiro Evero. But they go and get James Campen as the offensive line coach, Josh McCown as the quarterbacks coach, Deuce Staley for the running backs, Sean Jefferson for the wide receivers, Parks Frazier as the passing game coordinator, Dom Capers as a defensive assistant. David Tepper really got out his checkbooks and said, no, this is going to be one of the best coaching staffs in the NFL. I don't care how much I have to pay to make that happen, to bring these guys in. So I just respect the hell out of that. I think this is going to be a really well-run organization. And that does start at the top with Frank Reich. I mean, he has been, in his time in Indianapolis, to me, one of the premium CEO type of coaches as far as just being a relatable leader. The players love Frank Reich. The assistant coaches love Frank Reich. It is difficult to kind of comprehend what happened there in Indianapolis, where really in the snap of a finger, it felt like, you know, Matt Ryan came in, the offensive line had their issues, and then all of a sudden the owner stepped in and just deleted the entire culture that Frank Reich had spent building for 5 years. But before that all happened, I mean, just go back and listen to what I had said about the Colts for the last couple of years. Like, Frank Reich really did build one of the best cultures in Indianapolis. Extreme circumstances came in, like I said, and kind of washed away a lot of his work. But I have a lot of respect for what he's going to be able to do here coming into Carolina and just setting the bar high, steering the ship in the right direction, making sure everybody is working towards that goal together, and that is what culture is all about. So even if it's unproven, I do rank the Panthers here in that third tier of really just good overall team cultures, and that's going to be something that I think is going to raise up the Panthers from where I am on them as opposed to public perception. Like, they're third in gambling odds in this NFC South. I have them as the highest ranked team, and I think the hiring of Frank Reich, just kind of getting that CEO type, that established CEO type to steer this ship is going to be a really big deal. But it's not just that he's a great leader. He's a really good offensive mind. Now, I don't think Frank Reich is an offensive guru necessarily. Like, I wouldn't put him in the top 10 of offensive play callers or anything like that. And honestly, I don't know if he's calling plays or if Thomas Brown is going to call plays, but I do like his offensive prowess. I think a lot of the good stuff that the 2017 Eagles did with Nick Foles in that playoff run, you can point directly to Frank Reich, and he obviously got that head coaching job right after that, and he runs the Andy Reid modern pro spread offense. We did see him in recent years, though, go back a little bit in time to those kind of Ken Wisenhunt, more under center pro style days with the Jonathan Taylor run game. And having, Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan and some of these more old school pro style quarterbacks, he can wear a lot of different hats as far as what his offense can look like. It's going to be pretty much everything other than the Shanahan wide zone stuff. But then he hires Thomas Brown right up from under Sean McVay as his offensive coordinator. So now you're fully equipped to do really anything here schematically. I love this hire. If there is a criticism of Frank Reich being an older offensive mind, is he getting a little bit stale? I love bringing in a young, ascending Shanahan tree guy who's been with Sean McVay for the last 3 years. So I really think this run game is going to be diverse as far as the coaching is concerned. I think the passing game is going to be diverse. It's going to be a really healthy balance of old traditional pro style concepts, the Andy Reid modern pro spread stuff, the shotgun RPOs, shotgun run game, and then even a little bit of wide zone stuff under center. Stretch the corner with Miles Sanders in this athletic offensive line. Really excited to see what this scheme ultimately looks like. But needless to say, I'm very optimistic that they have the staff in place to put together a good playbook and, pull the right levers at the right time. And then it doesn't stop there, man. They bring in Ejiro Evero. What a freaking steal to get him from the Denver Broncos. The turmoil in Denver, the turnover. They actually flipped defensive coaches. Steve Wilkes is heading to Denver, and Ejiro Evero's heading here. And, I mean, you look at the job he did for the Broncos last year, as a guy that's already been an ascending, highly respected kind of Fangio tree defensive coordinator. You look at what he did in Denver, and yeah, he had Pat Surtain and Justin Simmons on the back end. That's great, but really not a super talented defense. The pass rushing was really non-existent last year. Draymond Jones, a pretty good player, but Randy Gregory wasn't there for them. The linebackers, whatever. The defensive back depth, whatever. And I love what Ejiro Evero did for them. They had a very solid to above average defense in Denver. And I think beyond that, what gets me so excited about Ejiro Evero is he's very much like Robert Saleh in my mind, or D'Amico Ryans, where, yeah, he wants to have the ability to run a Fangio-style defense on the back end, whether that's quarters, quarter, half, that kind of off cover three, where they're kind of keeping the top down from cover three, which they did a lot of in Denver. But he's not going to be so stubborn to just mash that repeatedly like Joe Barry or Joe Woods or Ed Donatel. He'll get up in your face when it's necessary. He started to blitz like crazy last year, and he has that background working with Wade Phillips, working with Dom Capers, which Capers has his flaws, but one thing he can do is drop some really nice blitz packages, and Dom Capers is here with them as a defensive assistant. The apprentice becomes the master here, as Evero was under Capers 6 years ago, but That's what being a great defensive mind is all about. Yes, have a scheme, have something that you want to base your defense out of and use that as a core philosophy, but you have to be able to adjust and cater to your defensive staff and your roster talent, and that's exactly what he did in Denver. So I do think he's an ascending mind. I think he's going to thrive here with the personnel they have in Carolina, and it's only a matter of time before he gets his opportunity as a head coach somewhere. And I think he sees this as a great opportunity for him to take that next leap. But for now, for Carolina to have him is really a blessing. So very optimistic about this coaching staff. Love the way they went about repairing this part of their organization. And now we're going to get into the roster breakdown here. But first things first, I want to thank the sponsor of the show, Underdog Fantasy. They've sponsored this entire series and will continue to do so throughout the summer. They've been awesome to work with, but they're also just the best place to play fantasy football. This is my first year doing best ball, and I can't get enough of it, man. What's the best part of fantasy football? It's draft day. It's, that looking at your roster after the draft and like, wow, I did the best job ever. Well, with best ball fantasy, you can do that right now. You can take out your phone, you can draft now, and then you can do as many leagues as you want because it's draft, set it, and forget it. They will pick the best lineup for you based on your drafted team every single week. There's no waivers, there's no trades. It'll put you in a league with 12 other users. You'll compete against them, and then at the end of it all, you'll be, if you do well, you'll be put into the $15 million prize pool. Yes, you heard that right. $15 million in prizes for Best Ball Mania 4 this year. You can sign up right now using promo code TFG, and if you do, they will match up to $100 on your first deposit. That's 4 free entries into Best Ball Mania 4, your chance at $15 million. You'll support my channel in the process. They also have daily pick'ems, which are amazing. They also have daily pick'ems for MLB, of course, the NFL, where you can get up to 20-1 payouts. They have season-long pick'ems for NFL right now, where you can really put your NFL knowledge to the test. Underdog just keeps up in their game, man. I know you guys are going to love playing on Underdog, and you can support my channel in the process, signing up at Underdog Fantasy using promo code TFG. But now let's get into the roster, and we're going to start by looking at the key aspects of this passing game, ranking the quarterback room and ranking the group of weapons here. So at quarterback, they're going to rank smack dab in the middle, 16th in the NFL with rookie quarterback Bryce Young. And for those that followed my draft analysis, this ranking's not horribly surprising. I freaking love Bryce Young. I've always loved Bryce Young. He's always been QB1 in my mind. Just the thought of CJ Stroud ever being the number 1 pick never made sense to me. The way Bryce Young sees the field, yes, I led things off with that buzzword. He sees the field, even though he's only 5'11 or 5'10 or whatever the official measurement was. If there's a criticism of short quarterbacks, it's they can't see over their O-line. They don't attack the middle of the field. Bryce Young hit in-breakers and crossing routes and deep crossers, as well as any quarterback in the last couple of years. So, yes, he sees the field, and the game moves in slow motion for him. Not just the processing ability, but that eye in the back of his head, that it factor, the pocket presence, the way that he can navigate pressure and extend plays when the structure of the offense isn't there. That's why you look at Bryce Young as a guy that can be someday an elite quarterback in this NFL. Someone that can elevate the offense around him, why you can swallow trading a guy like DJ Moore away a little bit, because you're bringing in a quarterback that, yeah, you lose DJ Moore, but you know who's going to be a lot better now that you have Bryce Young? Terrace Marshall, Jonathan Mingo, a second-round pick. That's the luxury of having a franchise high-end quarterback, and they feel that Bryce Young can be that way, and I certainly feel like he can be that, and I think he can be that very quickly. Obviously ranking them 16th in the NFL day one, because I think Bryce Young has a very good floor. I think he ran an NFL-style offense at Alabama. He has so many traits that will translate right away, whether it is the arm talent, the accuracy, the playmaking. But the upside is there as well. I think Bryce Young could be as good as the 10th best quarterback in the NFL this year. Dare I say, I think he could be the best quarterback in the NFC conference this year. And what's crazy is I don't even think that's that hot of a take considering the quarterbacks in this conference, but that's obviously going to bring some optimism and expectations for this Panthers team, but I think Bryce Young is well equipped to handle it. If you do want any more Bryce Young analysis from me, I do still have my quarterback rankings up here, my quarterback breakdown. You can go see even more about what I felt about Bryce Young as a prospect. But obviously, between the coaching staff and the quarterback here, it is going to be a large reason why I am a little bit higher on this Panthers team than a lot of people. I do love signing Andy Dalton. Really was impressed by what he did for the Saints last year, to the point that I'm not even guaranteeing that Derek Carr is going to be better than what Andy Dalton was for the Saints last year, which is obviously something Panthers fans will want to hear here. Not that you expect Andy Dalton to play that well every single year, but he made some really big throws. He is definitely going to be an excellent just locker room guy. He's known around the league as just one of the good dudes in the NFL. So to have him as that mentor for Bryce Young, you really couldn't ask for a better guy in the locker room. And a good mentor for Matt Corral as well, who's still here. I mean, if I'm the Minnesota Vikings, if I'm the Las Vegas Raiders, I don't know, Tampa, anybody, they wouldn't trade him to Tampa, but anybody that like still needs some future upside at quarterback, Matt Corral is probably never going to play here, and I still view him as a very talented prospect. I had him right there neck and neck with Sam Howell, Malik Willis. I still think there's a future where Matt Corral can develop and turn into a starting quarterback. So he's just kind of chilling. We'll see long term what ends up happening with him. I still would love someday for him to get an opportunity. I'm sure he will at some point. But this, bringing in Bryce Young obviously muddies things up for him. But yeah, very optimistic about Bryce Young's future for the Carolina Panthers. A little bit less optimistic as we look at the weaponry, though. They're going to rank 30th in the NFL in passing weapons. And, it's not a great group. There's no way around it. Adam Thielen, DJ Chark, Terrace Marshall, Jonathan Mingo, Laviska Shenault. There's a lot of capable NFL players here. And again, you're hoping that Bryce Young will play at such a good level that he can lift these guys up. And I think there will be a lot of areas and a lot of parts in individual games where he is lifting these guys up, but it is still important to consistently be open, to consistently catch the ball, to be able to win contested catches, and have a receiving core that can operate at a very high level to also lift the quarterback up. And I don't think this is a group that's going to do that. I do like the diversity of skill sets. I do think that this is enough for them to still compete in the NFC South and ultimately in the NFC, given the current landscape of those aforementioned entities. But long term, they're going to have to either have these young players like Terrace Marshall, Jonathan Mingo become really good players, or bring in some other bodies. But let's break these guys down individually a little bit more. So Adam Thielen, who certainly is trending down. The film just isn't anything special from him over the last couple of years, but especially last year. He can still separate from the slot. He has those subtle push-offs, the quick feet. If you just want him to run a stick route, a speed out, a slant, he can be a functional player. He's going to be the most reliable red zone target for Bryce Young. Like when he starts to extend plays down there in the red zone, where I wrote in my scouting notes, he has an Aaron Rodgers-esque it factor in the red zone to extend plays, work with his receivers in scramble drill while also protecting the football. It's truly remarkable. Adam Thielen, I think, is going to be his guy. So I do think there's going to be touchdown production there from Adam Thielen, but I don't think there's going to be a large volume there. I doubt there's going to be many games where he gets over 100 yards receiving, for example. He's going to be a reliable short to intermediate and red zone option for them. And then you bring in DJ Chark, who certainly is not what he was in his second year in Jacksonville, which is definitely the best he's ever been, where he looked like a potential, kind of Deshaun Jackson-esque deep threat. It just didn't sustain for any variety of reasons, whether that was the injuries that have stacked up for him, potentially slowing him down a little bit, but also just not being that consistent hands catcher, someone that doesn't always win those tough catches down the field. Now, he had one of his best games of last season against this Panthers team. It's funny how often teams just sign the guys that killed them the year before, and Chark did look good against them, and he did play better as the year went on, still trying to kind of get back to speed coming off of injury. They only gave him a 1-year, $5 million contract. They're not expecting much from him. So I do think he's a capable perimeter starter, probably more of a name than he is a high-end receiver at this point. Not that I don't like the signing or that he can't be a useful player, but I think he's a little bit of a Band-Aid as a perimeter option for this team. And I'm certainly not going to predict a re-breakout for DJ Chark. The breakout that I could see happening here, well, there's really two, but the first one that I would maybe even expect this year is Terrace Marshall. I've talked about how Bryce Young can be a quarterback that can elevate some of these playmakers and get the most out of them. Terrace Marshall is a guy we've just been kind of waiting on for a while now. Highly recruited player, goes to LSU. First couple of years of his career was behind Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. Just wasn't a whole lot of targets to go around towards him. LSU fell apart in Marshall's junior year, was still their number one wide receiver, but the quarterback play, the play calling, it would just, everybody left after they won that championship, and he was the one guy left standing. And it hurt his draft stock. It hurt his confidence. He ends up going in the second round and just wasn't really ready to thrive as a focal point of an NFL offense. But I do think when you look at what he did at the end of last season, as the Panthers offense started to play much better, as Sam Darnold kind of gave them real NFL quarterback play in the last 5 games of last season, he definitely showed that he can play. The athleticism and the size, the traits we've all known have been there, but he started to show route running and the ability to win tough catches and be more of a focal point of the passing game. So I know a lot of the attention is on Jonathan Mingo being the second-round pick coming in. To me, Terrace Marshall's going to have to fail first before we see Jonathan Mingo, and I'm not expecting Marshall to fail. He's only 23 years old, if that. He might still be 22. He was super young when he got drafted. He has an exceptional opportunity here, and I think in the Panthers' mind, his upside is a reason they could justify trading away DJ Moore a little bit. So I have the arrow pointing up on him, certainly, but then you're kind of getting a second dart to throw at that upside in Jonathan Mingo, who you can explain away some of his lack of college production in a similar way that we just did with Terrace Marshall. The passing game at Ole Miss just was not conducive to high-level success for these wide receivers. But Mingo still did produce and showed a lot of really high-end traits at the wide receiver position. The first thing you think of when you look at him is like, yeah, that's kind of like Deebo Samuel. Like, just get the ball in his hands. He's big. He's fast. He can run through defensive backs. And he certainly does that. I think he could do even more, with a little bit more creativity. And I don't know if that's ever going to be a huge part of his game, but I thought he ran good routes. I thought he had a good release off the line of scrimmage. The speed is real. He's got size. He's not disturbed by contact. It's just a matter of giving him more opportunities to prove that he can, be a downfield receiver more consistently. And the Panthers obviously believe in that. They spent a high second-round pick on him. He already showed to me at the Senior Bowl, being kind of ripped out of that Ole Miss passing game, that he has pro-level traits. So he came off the board a little bit higher than even myself expected, even though I loved Jonathan Mingo. He was a guy I had discussed in certain my guys conversations in the draft. So, even if I'm placing Terrace Marshall's expectations above Jonathan Mingo here in 2023, that's not to say I don't believe in Jonathan Mingo and his upside. They also have Laviska Shenault, who at this point I'm not expecting to develop his route running and well-roundedness as a wide receiver, but he is some of that Deebo Samuel in him, where with the ball in his hands, he's one of the best run-after-catch receivers in the NFL. I still think he's a functional playmaker and a good fourth receiver to have. He's their fifth here. They also have Damiere Byrd as a deep threat, just kind of hanging out here, along with Shi Smith, who showed some good stuff from the slot. So they really do have functional NFL receivers, and if Bryce Young is as good as I think he can be, they're gonna be okay. it's just not going to be overly reliable or dynamic. But they're either going to need Terrace Marshall and Jonathan Mingo to reach their upside, or they're going to have to invest heavily in a free agent wide receiver, in a trade for a wide receiver, in the draft for a wide receiver. They're not going to have their first round pick this year. So I do think for that reason, they're going to have to find out if these guys can play, and they're going to give them opportunities for that reason. So it's going to be a complete rotation here. I do think if you're in like best ball, I don't mind grabbing Terrace Marshall or Jonathan Mingo late just because the upside's there. And I definitely like taking Bryce Young, who's going in like the 14th round right now. You know, I don't view him as a normal rookie quarterback. I think he's going to step in and be a good player right away. So maybe that's where the value is. But they're just kind of getting by until some of these guys develop or until they can bring in some other more reliable pieces. But I do think they did a good job with what was available to them when there just weren't a lot of big name receiver options on the market, and they obviously gave up their first round pick to go get Bryce Young. Beyond that, they do bring in Hayden Hurst, who's an athletic matchup piece at tight end, not much of a blocker, pretty good after the catch. Love that he's returning home, and I think he's a capable receiving tight end, and that's about it. If he was going to break out, it probably would have been last year with Joe Burrow. Not really expecting anything crazy here, but don't hate the signing. They got Ian Thomas, who is a good blocker, but just so unreliable in the receiving game. So many drops and lack of ability to win contested catches. They got Tommy Tremble as well, who's kind of this team's hybrid move blocker type. He's really good in that role. He's good if you get the ball in his hands. He is very fast, but in year 3 now, a guy that just hasn't taken those strides in the receiving aspects, whether that's route running or hands consistency. So he's kind of slotting into a decent role as a move blocker. Definitely a good third piece, even if he hasn't quite returned what they hoped they were going to get from him as a third-round pick. Very similar, actually, to what we just talked about with Josiah DeGuara and the Packers. They still got Steven Sullivan, who's kind of an athletic developmental tight end. Maybe he has some, come to Jesus moment as a tight end, but not to be expected. As far as the running backs are concerned, Miles Sanders, interesting. Philadelphia basically never uses their running backs in the receiving game, and when they did, a lot of times it was Kenneth Gainwell out there. I don't think he's shown that he's a horrible receiving back. I don't think he's the most instinctive guy or has the most reliable hands, but he is a guy that can run away from linebackers and make guys miss after the catch. So it's difficult to imagine him being a bad receiving back, even though his production has never been fantastic. I do think he's in an offense that's going to utilize those backs a lot more than they did in Philadelphia. So I think he's going to be pretty good in that phase. Chuba Hubbard is solid there as well. Another guy that, given more opportunities, could show some of those hands and route running that, there's been flashes at the NFL level, but obviously Christian McCaffrey's been here for a long time. You kind of got to go back to his prime at Oklahoma State to the last time he was solid in the receiving game. And then I really like what we saw from Raheem Blackshear as well. He was another guy that, took a lot of receiving opportunities away from Chuba Hubbard after they traded away Christian McCaffrey. Blackshear showed smooth hands, great route running. He's one of those scat back builds at 5'9", 195. So I do think there's something there. I don't think they're going to shy away from using him because of how good he looked in that first year with Carolina last year. So it's another situation where, these guys are all probably going to eat off each other in the receiving game. I think they're all capable. None of them are established as like dynamic receiving backs. So again, they do rank 30th in the NFL for overall weaponry. It's a functional group. Everybody is highly targeting weapons right now. So ranking 30th doesn't mean this is a useless core. It is a useful core. It's just not overly dynamic or difference making, Like outside of Tennessee, who ranked 32nd, I'm not really necessarily like panicking about any other receiving core in the NFL. There's a lot of depth at this group in the league. But let's move on and talk a little bit more about these running backs as actual runners of the football. So the Panthers are going to rank 20th in the NFL for me with the running backs. A lot of people will look at Miles Sanders' fantasy stats last year, the 1,400 rushing yards, including playoffs, and say, That's too low. This guy was one of the top rushers in the NFL last year. How do they rank 20th? And I just don't view Miles Sanders that way. I think you look at what happened in Philadelphia, and it was arguably the most running back friendly opportunity that any running back has had in 5 years in the NFL. You have a team that wanted to run the piss out of the football, depending on the matchup, the best offensive line in the NFL, great play calling, and a quarterback keeper game that always kept at least one defender off of you in the run game. So, like, did I watch Miles Sanders tape last year and walk away overly impressed? No. I think he's a good back, clearly. I rank him with an 81 grade here. They're 20th in the NFL at running back, which is a very respectable ranking. He's going to help this run game do what they want to do. But, I think you look at what the Panthers paid him, and that tells you everything you want to know. Yeah, you see the initial tweet from, the Shefty bomb, 4 years, $25 million. You're like, oh my God, they gave Miles Sanders $25 million. No, it's really a 2-year, $11 million contract. It's basically like what the Vikings gave Alexander Mattison if he happens to play well in 2025, 2026. He's got, a high base salary, and he'll be like a $8 million cap hit. But if he's playing, if he's playing well enough to pay him that, they can keep him. If he drops off after leaving Philadelphia, they can cut him after next year with essentially no dead money. So I'm not trying to rain on Panthers fans' parade, but I'm not expecting a massive season from Miles Sanders. I'm not expecting him to be a franchise running back here. He's a athletic back whose vision looked better last year when he had wide open lanes, but before last year, in a perfect opportunity, his vision was very questionable. A guy similar to like DeAndre Swift, where he's always bouncing runs outside and trying to hit home runs and being a frustration to the coaching staff because he's just not taking what's there all the time. Do those issues pop back up in Carolina? I also don't think he's a powerful runner. Yeah, he broke a lot of tackles because he had a lot of space to work with last year, and he is a shifty runner, but I think that rate comes down. I don't want to keep things too pessimistic. I don't hate the signing. I think it's a team-friendly contract, and he's going to be a solid, productive player for them. But I could see expectations getting a little bit too crazy for him, whereas in my mind, I see this as a running back by committee. Yeah, Sanders will get the majority of the carries here, but Chuba Hubbard looked really good last year. A lot of explosive runs, looked closer to that, what year was that? 2019, when Chuba Hubbard was one of the top backs in college football. Once upon a time was viewed as someone that might be the rare first-round running back prospect. Had a down year the year after that, but I do see a guy with speed and some of the ability to run through arm tackles. Honestly, in his prime at Oklahoma State, he reminded me a lot of Travis Etienne. I still think there's a world where he can be something like that player. So I think the arrow is pointing up for Chuba Hubbard. If I'm drafting one of these guys in fantasy, it's Chuba Hubbard at the very end of the draft as opposed to Miles Sanders, where you have to pay to get him right now. But, overall, 20th is a respectable ranking. I'm not trying to crap on this running back room. I'm just trying to tamper expectations on Miles Sanders a little bit. There's a lot of good running backs in the NFL, and top 20 is pretty solid for this group, and I think it's going to be a good rotation. Behind these two, you got some options. You got Raheem Blackshear, who, like I mentioned with the receiving game, showed a lot of flashes. He's got some juice if they want to run more wide zone. I mentioned Thomas Brown is coming from that Shanahan wide zone scheme. If they, Sanders and Hubbard are good options for that too. So, we might be reaching here a little bit, but I think Blackshear can certainly handle those style runs, whereas opposed to between the tackles, you might have some more questions with his size. I do have the eyes on Spencer Brown. If injuries started to pop up, Spencer Brown might have to come from the practice squad, but I liked him as a prospect. I had kind of shades of James Robinson as a pro comp for him, just as that kind of nice inside zone runner. So keep an eye on him. They also take Cameron Peoples out of Appalachian State, or I think he was an undrafted pickup, not a 7th round pick. They also stole Tyon Evans from the Rams, who's another undrafted free agent. So, I think all those guys can kind of play. Brown, Peoples, and Evans, certainly unproven, but yeah, it's a good running back room. Again, not trying to dunk on Miles Sanders, just trying to temper expectations a little bit. I know a lot of people come here looking for fantasy advice. In my opinion, I'm probably staying away from Sanders. As far as the multiplier that they're going to get from the quarterback here, I don't think it's going to be a ton. I do think they'll run play action boots with Bryce Young. Why would you not? And that's going to help keep that backside defensive end honest for when they do want to run wide zone. But I don't expect them to run a lot of read option stuff here, considering his frame. That's when you could really get into some questions about his frame and his size, is if he's taking hits in the run game, because he does a good job of protecting himself in the drop back passing game. I was not as worried about the durability stuff as a lot of, the discussion was surrounding Bryce Young was about the durability stuff. Two of the quarterbacks in the last 5 years that have had massive injury issues were Andrew Luck and Cam Newton, who are massive individuals. I think it's much more about how you protect yourself than it is about your frame. And speaking about protecting the quarterback, let's get into the offensive line here. It's a good group that has some small questions. But as far as NFL offensive lines are concerned, not that many questions. They rank in the top 12 for me as an overall unit, 10th in pass blocking, 11th in run blocking. Really no elite players yet, depending on how well Ikem Ekwonu develops this year, but a bunch of really solid players. It is a offensive line by no weak link approach here, if you will. So from left to right, you have Ikem Ekwonu, their high first-round pick last year at left tackle. Really loved what we saw from him. It was kind of strange, though. I was actually a little bit underwhelmed by his run blocking and was impressed by his pass blocking. I thought it would be a little more extreme, where he took his lumps in pass protection, and he certainly did, but I thought he would take even more lumps, and I thought he'd be a more dominant run blocker. Now, there were flash run blocks. The issues he had in run blocking was leaving a double team too early, not knowing which linebacker to grab. I think bringing in James Campen and Frank Reich, really getting better coaching here, is going to help with some of those assignment-based mistakes that he made, and let him just play fast and maul dudes in the run game, where he's going to really take a step up this year. And I think in pass protection as well, you're already encouraged by what you saw by his rookie season. So again, he wasn't a perfect rookie left tackle. Most rookie left tackles aren't, or just tackles in general. It's very rare you find Rashawn Slater or Tristan Wirfs, right? So he took his lumps, but very much expecting that kind of Andrew Thomas-esque trajectory where he's going to just continue to get better to the point where he is one of the best tackles in the NFL. His upside is insane. Loved this pick when they made him, and even if he's going to have some hiccups in pass protection from time to time, you're very happy with him at left tackle. Then you got Brady Christensen at left guard. Assuming this group is all healthy, he's going to be your biggest question mark. He took a step up last year, was a left tackle coming out of BYU, and last year was kind of his first year full go as the left guard, was their day one starter ever since week one against Cleveland. And he was just extremely up and down, and it makes sense when you think about him because he's super light. He's like 295 pounds. That was his thing coming out, was it's just not a large offensive lineman. And the play strength stuff is always going to be something that probably holds him back unless he really grows in the weight room this year. Certainly possible. We do see it. And if that happens, his technique is fantastic. He's a super smooth athlete. There is still upside there, but until I see him out there playing at 310, 315 pounds, I'm not going to expect that. You know what I'm saying? But he's reliable in pass protection unless you leave him one-on-one with like Cam Hayward, who ate his lunch last year. You know, a good power rusher is not going to have much of a hard time getting through Brady Christensen, but any kind of stunt or pass rusher that's trying to beat him with a spin move or a swim move, he can handle that stuff. He's very technically refined with good feet. As a run blocker, you know, some of those play strength concerns do show up. He's not moving a whole lot of people. Looks a lot better blocking wide zone than he does any other scheme. Not the worst run blocker you've ever seen in your life. He's willing. But again, there's only so much you can do as an offensive lineman when you're basically always reacting and trying to anchor as opposed to dictating the attack, which is just difficult without a lot of play strength. So maybe he can beef up. Maybe he can't. Who knows? But then you get to center. You got Bradley Bozeman now locked and loaded as your starting center. They gave him a nice contract extension. I'm glad they did that. You know, it was kind of weird what played out with him last year. They brought him in from Baltimore. He was kind of hurt in camp. They go with Pat Elflein over him. even though Bozeman was kind of like ready to go. And then by midseason, they turn it back over to Bozeman, and things were much, much better in the run game, especially. He is a people mover. He's a willing kind of dickhead of a center where he is going to look to bury you. Pass protection is a drawback in his game. You know, as we've said throughout this series, if your center is your worst pass protector, that's probably a best case scenario. Just know when you're getting him one-on-one and try to avoid that. Give him help. He doesn't have the best lateral movement ability to control his blocker and pass protection, but he's a very good center. Got a sizable like $6 million a year to be their starting center here. So he's good to go. And then at right guard, you have Austin Corbett, or at least you hope you do. He tore his ACL early January, so 9 months would set him like right at week 1. And it's just really tough with ACL recoveries. We've seen now a large list of offensive linemen, you know, whether it's David Bakhtiari, Ronnie Stanley, just not have that 9-month recovery. There's got to be some concern in the back of your mind that he's not going to be ready week 1. And even if he is, you know, is he going to be 100%? It's going to be something that adds some variance to this offensive line and makes it a little bit harder to rank because it's pretty much unproven or poor talent behind Austin Corbett. But I'm kind of expecting just, and I don't have any like evidence for this. This is just kind of my gut feeling. I think he's going to miss probably like 5 weeks where they're trotting out Cam Irving or Chandler Zavala. Could be an issue there for a while. My gut tells me they're going to wait till he feels like he's full go. I don't think he has a history of ACLs or anything like that off the top of my head. So like, you're hoping he can recover, get out there early to mid-season, and re-secure that right guard spot. Because when he's out there, he's a very sound, balanced guard. Excellent pass protection technique. He's got that play strength you look for, the foot technique, the hand placement, good run blocker. Not the strongest guy in the world, but very effective. So you do definitely want to get him back out there healthy. In the meantime, you know, I think it's probably a competition between Cam Irving, who's played a lot of guard in the NFL. When he's played the last couple of years, he's been okay. You know, it was kind of a big name earlier on his career. Now he's just been a journeyman veteran. With Bryce Young's mobility, you can survive with Cam Irving at right guard, but it's certainly not ideal. I'll say that. I mean, he is not a reliable pass protector. The interesting thing would certainly be Chandler Zavala, who they spent a 4th-round pick on. He actually played next to Ikem Ekwonu 2 years ago at NC State. He's a really fun player. He's a great athlete, a really good run blocker. I don't think he's ready day one to be a starting caliber pass protector. I just think there's going to be a little bit of a learning period there. So, again, not ideal that he's out there week 1 potentially. Certainly upside there for him to turn into a starting caliber player. But if you are trying to avoid Bryce Young getting hit by 300-pound defensive tackles, which this team should be looking to do that, you know, if you get to late July here and Austin Corbett's not looking like he's going to be available week 1, I'm perusing the free agent market to see if I can find any non-turnstiles to play at guard for me. So we'll see how that all plays out. You know, Corbett could be there week 1. We don't know for sure. And that's obviously the hope. And then you got right tackle, Taylor Moton. Not a ton to really say there. Another player that's just a rock-solid right tackle, similar to what we said about with Jake Matthews for the Falcons, where, you know, he's not the best athlete in the world. I think, you know, Moton's less athletic than Matthews, but a little bit stronger. But anyway, just a guy that's not an elite run blocker, not an elite pass protector, but extremely reliable. Not someone you got to think about, has always been available for this team, and is just an absolute stud and a rock at right tackle. The best they have at this point in time, and then they're hoping that Ikem Ekwonu can become an even better player than Moton, to the point where you then have one of the better tackle duos in the NFL. So that's excellent. As far as the rest of the depth is concerned, you got a veteran in Justin McCray, who's bounced around the league. He's been a solid run blocker, a decent athlete, but really a poor pass protector. Not someone I would love to see out there for them. Sam Tecklenburg played for this team 2 years ago at center, I believe, and was okay. Could get in the mix. I could see a world where he's their best pass protecting option after Austin Corbett. You got Cade Mays, who was a developmental tackle a year ago. Just kind of house money if he's any good. And then Michael Jordan, I mean, just from a karma perspective, I wouldn't want him anywhere near this team. Although that's funny to say that, given that, Hall of Fame NBA Michael Jordan is a North Carolina guy, but Michael Jordan was the guy that got Joe Burrow hurt in his freshman year or his rookie year because he's so bad in pass protection. So, God, do not play Michael Jordan or even keep him on this team. I think he's one of the worst players rostered in the NFL. Actual Hornets owner Michael Jordan coming down the street might be a better option at guard than this Michael Jordan. But you've got some decent skill player blockers here for sure. Don't love Hayden Hurst as a tight end as far as run blocking is concerned. He's willing, but just doesn't really stick on his blocks. But Ian Thomas really impressed me on film. They're still going to play him a good bit because of what he does as a run blocker, as a pass protector as well. Adam Thielen, playing from the slot, should actually be able to kind of keep some of those slot corners from muddying up the backfield. Chark and Marshall are adequate as your LSU duo on the outside there, but pretty standard group of skill blockers. Again, overall, they rank 12th for overall offensive line, 10th in pass blocking, and 11th in run blocking. And I think if you could guarantee me Austin Corbett was healthy to start the year, it'd probably be about top 10. But that is going to add a question mark there. But as far as giving a rookie quarterback in Bryce Young an offensive line that he can really succeed behind, I do think this can be that. Not a lot of rookies coming to the league with potential top 10 offensive lines, and that's going to be the case here, which is definitely going to make up for some of the mediocrity with the weaponry in a lot of departments. So let's recap this offense as a whole. They are going to come out 24th for overall offense. I was surprised that my formula spit out the 25th ranked run game. I think that lack of any sort of notably standout trait in the run game, the running backs are fine. The run blocking is mostly really good, but has a couple question marks. They don't have some dynamic numbers changer as a quarterback either. They don't have Jalen Hurts or Anthony Richardson or Justin Fields. 25th does definitely sound low. I'm not going to lie. It's just the way the math came out. I think this is going to be a solid run game. I definitely don't think they're going to be a top 10 run game, but I think they're going to be able to come off the ball and stay ahead of the chains in the run game, for what it's worth. So I don't know. I guess there's just a lot of solid run games in the NFL that have more dynamic pieces, but they did come out 21st in the passing game, which definitely sounds spot on to me. I love the staff. I love the quarterback. I think the pass protection is going to be pretty damn good. But it is a rookie quarterback throwing to kind of a motley crew of weapons. They're probably going to take some lumps trying to convert difficult third downs and have a lot of those explosives through the air that they look for. So again, 24th overall offense. It's going to be a really solid, balanced group in my opinion. But let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball. And there's a lot of roster talent here. I think that would be kind of the third aspect of this team as far as why the Panthers rank for me as the best team in the NFC South is I think it's going to be a very solid, reliable defense that's really well coached under Ejiro Evero. So let's start with the defensive line, where they rank smack dab in the middle for both pass rush and D-line run defense, 16th in both of those rankings. A talented front here, headlined by, of course, Brian Burns, who had the best year of his career last year. And the biggest thing I love about Brian Burns is he's starting to add a little bit more of a bull rush and really showing that ability to convert speed to power. Ever since he came out of Florida State, we knew he'd be able to win the edge. We knew he had some of the best bend in the NFL as an edge rusher. We knew he had spin moves to work inside. And he's continued to get better at packaging those things together as a threat, which has helped his production spike. But you start to put the fear of God in offensive tackles that you can, wind up and drive them back off the ball. Even if he's not Brandon Graham or Rashawn Gary, the fact that it's in there, good enough to put that fear in there, that's when you can really start to get into that kind of defensive player of the year, elite edge rush territory. I still think he's putting all of those pieces together yet. The week-to-week consistency still hasn't been as good as you get from Nick Bosa and Micah Parsons, like that rarefied air of pass rushers. I do think the upside is there. I do think the arrow can still be pointing up for him, and it is a contract year, so definitely expecting big things from Brian Burns this year. At this point, the biggest knock on him is he is just not that good of a run defender. There are splash plays in run defense that I'm sure Panthers fans would throw some highlights at me and say, see, look, he can defend the run. Like, yeah, he has some instincts to, sidestep blocks and, have those splash stops in the backfield. He's got the sideline to sideline contain, but he's not taking on offensive tackles and setting a hard edge like you typically want to see from these edge guys. He's not a total liability, but it's not a huge strength there. On the other side, however, with the edge group, it's interesting. There's really like 3 rotational starters there opposite of Brian Burns. And oddly enough, the worst of those 3 options is probably the guy that's going to get the most snaps because he's the most consistent edge setter in the run game, and that's Yetur Gross-Matos. But at this point, Gross-Matos, who was drafted off of physical upside, hasn't shown a lick of pass rush development in his career. And to me, like, if it ain't happening yet, it's not going to happen. I just don't think he has the instincts to rush the passer. So you're hoping that his snap count, I think he played like 850 snaps last year. You're hoping Avero can recognize that, get that down to like 450, and be a little bit better with this rotation where you're bringing in Frankie Louvu on the edge on pass rush downs, where you have Marquise Haynes out there. Again, Louvu and Haynes aren't really edge setters in the run defense. Neither is Brian Burns. So there is still a value to Yetur Gross-Matos, but it's about recognizing when that's necessary and when it's not. It's great to have someone that's difficult to move against wide zone, but anticipating when you're going to get wide zone ran against you is important. And if you don't think that's going to happen, can you get away with Haynes and Louvu out there who might get moved off the ball a little bit more while trading off for better pass rush? So it's going to be an interesting balance for Avero to handle. But especially when Louvu is out there, you do feel the juice he brings as a rusher. Now, he gets moved all over the place. It's not just off the edge. It's as that blitzing linebacker where he'll fire up the A-gap. He is just impossible for a running back to block because he comes in with his hair on fire. He's got a lightning quick first step. He's 235 pounds, which is plenty of size to overwhelm any sort of not just, running back, but a tight end trying to block him. But he's quick and bendy and has different pass rush moves, especially as a blitzer. But he's okay off the edge, too. Like, he's got inside counters. He's got that speed and bend around the edge. So he's just kind of a pass rushing chess piece that's going to get in there for about a third of their pass rushing snaps. And that's how they used him last year with Steve Wilks. I fully anticipate that Avero's going to do the same. I mean, he did that last year with Baron Browning. Why would you not with Frankie Louvu? I know you've got the coordinator change there, but I'm still expecting similar usage from Louvu, especially when you look at how they're staffed defensively as well, or rostered defensively as well, with some of the stuff with Jeremy Chin substituting Louvu at linebacker. We'll get into a little bit more of that conversation momentarily. But Louvu has to be factored into the pass rush here, as does Marquise Haynes, who's really developed in his career. He's not a star, he's not a starter, but as a kind of 6 man of the year pass rusher type, very effective player. He was a highly recruited guy coming out of Ole Miss. I think he's, it kind of reminds me of like Arden Key with the Tennessee Titans. Just early in his career, a lot of these highly recruited guys just haven't quite learned how to develop because they didn't have to early on. Because they're so physically gifted. But once they get to the NFL and they're not working offensive tackles every week, they put their head down and get to work, and you really see their games grow. And we've seen that with Marquise Haynes, who's got some power. He's got some pass rush moves. He's an effective pass rusher off the bench. Nothing crazy, but definitely better than what they get from Yetur Gross-Matos. So that's kind of your 4-man starting rotation there off the edge. DJ Johnson was a fascinating pick in the 3rd round. Definitely a reach by everybody's standards. Less of a reach for me than the kind of consensus rankings, but still a reach. I think I had a 4th to a 5th round grade on DJ Johnson. They draft him in the 3rd, which is pretty high expectations for an edge player. You're hoping he can at least become a Marquise Haynes level rotational player, and he still has a ways to go before he's reliable there. He is a 24-year-old prospect, was super week to week at Oregon. But what I did like about DJ Johnson, not just that he ran a 4.5 40 at 265 pounds, but he's a big body guy that can really power rush people when everything connects. But that when is the question mark, and how often he can get the first step to pair with the hand placement, to pair with the core strength to drive guys back. It's just not all there. And at 24 years old, you got to raise some questions on if the consistency is ever going to be there. He does defend the run well. I do think if you're looking for bigger bodied edge setters up front, DJ Johnson has a chance to get in the mix there. But to me, I don't think you want to count on him year one, though he's a fascinating pick. Amari Barno, I never really saw it with him. Another guy that just ran super fast, but his tape just sucks and has sucked at the NFL level in year one. Just classic developmental traits-based prospect that I don't think is ready. And then you got a bunch of undrafted types beyond that competing for a roster spot. The one guy there to keep an eye on is Eku Leota, who's very similar to Frankie Louvu in a lot of ways, where he can play that stand-up edge, can rotate back into a linebacker, spot drop, a useful kind of hybrid edge backer that these kind of 3-4 Fangio-style systems seem to always find a use for a guy like this, whether it's Frankie Louvu or Malik Reed or Justin Hollins. I think Eku Leota can be in that breadth of guys who are all not highly invested players coming into the league that carve out nice roles. So we'll keep an eye on Leota. But then you get to the interior defensive line, and it's also a very talented group. And one of the more underrated players in the league right now is this guy right here, Derek Brown. He was a top 10 pick by the Panthers 3 years ago, and he's been quietly developing every year here, especially as a run defender, where he's showed last year he can play the nose, he can split double teams. You know, earlier on in his career, he wasn't dominant at it, but really loved the tape he put out there. And they're going to ask more of him in a true Fangio-style scheme here to do that, but I think he can handle it. But as a pass rusher, he's extremely underrated. He has 6 career sacks. He had 1 sack this year, but he did have 40 pressures. The amount of times that he was forcing the quarterback off his spot, generating that push and opening up sack opportunities for everyone else, whether that was Frankie Louvu or Haynes or Brian Burns, it was so noticeable when you get into the film, and those sack numbers will come. To get 1 sack on 40 pressures is like losing a hand of blackjack with a 20 and the dealer's showing a 2. Like, that's just not going to happen most of the time. So I'm definitely expecting Derek Brown to kind of have, it's not a perfect comparison because I think Quinnen is a little bit more explosive of an athlete, but Quinnen Williams had a little bit more of a quiet first 3 years, and then year 4 was like, boom, that's a superstar defensive tackle. I see a similar trajectory with Derek Brown, and is really just a perfect complement to Brian Burns. And if both Brown and Burns really kick it up a notch this year, because they're already a really good couple of players, but if they can both kind of continue to grow, which isn't a guarantee because they have both been in the league now for, 7 years between the two of them, but this really has a chance to be a special duo that can get the Panthers into being one of the 10 best pass rushes in the NFL this year. But it is a lot of pressure on those guys because we already went through the edge group. There's not a whole lot of other guys there. And the interior group, there's really not a whole lot of guys there either. You know, Shai Tuttle, they gave him a good contract, and I'm glad they did, but he is just not a pass rusher, man. He is a, typical run-defending defensive tackle that is good to patrol his gaps laterally. He anchors well. He's got really strong arms and can shed at the point of attack. He can play the nose. I'm not trying to insult this signing, and Tuttle's a huge reason they rank 16th in run defense, despite the fact that their edge group isn't that good against the run. Like, between Derek Brown and Shai Tuttle, a big thing with the Fangio defense is to be able to defend the run with 2 defensive tackles out there, and they're giving themselves a very good chance of being able to do that by signing Shai Tuttle. but it is going to come at the cost of some pass rush from that second defensive tackle. I mean, Shy Tuttle has 17 pressures in the last 2 years on just over 500 pass rushing snaps. That's brutal. Didn't have a single sack in both 2020 and 2021. 5 sacks in his career. So the skill set just isn't there. But clearly they will live with that, knowing they have Brown and Burns who can generate a pass rush. Clearly they want to be able to defend the run with 6 guys in the box, which is not easy to do. But having Derek Brown and Shy Tuttle is going to make that easier. They've got some pretty clear rotational options. Deshaun Williams brought in from Denver, that familiarity with Ajero Evero. I assume they will use him. Similarly, when they get into base 3-4 fronts, he will be their kind of 4-eye defensive end. He's a balanced, okay veteran. Okay with that signing. They paid him under $2 million. Fine for what it is. They also still have Henry Anderson here. Very similarly, can play that kind of 4-eye defensive end. Not someone you really want eating double teams or anything like that, but in this scheme, he makes sense. And then they have Marquand McCall, who's going to be more of that nose tackle. McCall's interesting. He actually showed some flashes. I think they could actually have a pretty dangerous front 3 there with McCall eating a double team as a nose and Brown as a 2 and Tuttle as a 4-eye. Be a pretty tough group to block if it's a have to have it 3rd and short. So we'll see some of that, but mostly Derek Brown and Shy Tuttle will be playing the nose. And then you got Bravion Roy, John Pennicini, among a bunch of other names that they brought in to compete here. Raekwon Williams, Taylor Stallworth, Antoine Jackson. I do want to highlight Jalen Redmond out of Oklahoma. Really athletic guy. I thought he should have been drafted. He ran like a 4.8 at 285 plus pounds. I mean, why not bring in that athleticism and as an undrafted free agent? Someone that has some flashes in there. So, whether he's a practice squad guy or, sneaks on the back end of the roster, someone to keep an eye on there in Jalen Redmond, the undrafted pickup. But yeah, I like this defensive line. There's a lot of good D-lines in the league. The Panthers are smack dab in the middle right now, 16th in pass rush, 16th in D-line run defense. Going to be an asset for this defense, though. As is this linebacking group. Really fun group of linebackers. One of the more versatile groups in the league. So they're going to come in ranking 8th in linebacker coverage and 11th in linebacker run defense. Very good group. So Shaq Thompson is your true actual linebacker here. And then you have Frankie Luvu, who is, as we mentioned, going to play some edge, some blitz linebacker, a lot of true linebacker as well. So his splits are going to be about 2/3 of his snaps. He's going to be doing real linebacker stuff. Maybe 1/3 of his snaps, he's going to be on the ball playing edge. That's what he did last year. It's what I'm expecting to be similar this year. And the reason they're able to do that is that on 3rd down and on, 2nd and long and true pass down situations, Jeremy Chin is playing linebacker. So Luvu slides down to play D-line, Chin slides in, and then they'll bring in their 6th defensive back to be the other safety. So you have to put Jeremy Chin up here as a contributor to the linebacker coverage, because about 1/3 to 1/4 of Jeremy Chin's snaps, he's going to be playing at linebacker. So you got to really, look at what this group is going to be on the field, not just what it shows on the depth chart. So let's go through them one by one. Shaq Thompson really did actually impress me on film quite a bit. I think he only had a 56 PFF coverage grade last year, but I think a lot of that is they asked a lot of him in coverage, really asking him to run down the seam with slot receivers and man up a lot of tight ends and running backs. And it's tough. And you're going to get beat when you're a linebacker having to do a lot of those assignments. But he handled it really about as well as you can ask by anyone not named Fred Warner. I thought his tape was really good. I think the speed is absolutely still there. This is a guy that did play safety at Washington, so a lot of those instincts are there. He just navigates the field really well in zone coverage as well. He takes away play action extremely well. So I'm not so worried about the PFF coverage grade that obviously hasn't looked great the last couple of years. I think the film and when this staff reviews the games, they are very comfortable with Shaq Thompson in this role still. So I'm a big fan of him. As far as run defense is concerned, I would kind of go the other way. Not too obsessed about PFF grades, but he had like a 90 plus PFF run defense grade. I don't think he's a elite run defender. I don't. I think he's got solid to above average shed strength. I think his kind of trigger and play diagnostics are solid to good. I just don't see him as, Bobby Wagner out there or what Luke Kuechly was for this team or anything like that. But he's very good. I'm not trying to take that away from him. He had a career year in run defense last year. I expect him to be somewhere between the kind of more average run defender that he's been throughout his career and the great one he was last year. And a big reason I say that is tackling has always been an area of question for him. He usually hovers around that 10 to 12% missed tackle percentage, which is pretty high for a number one linebacker. Big reason he graded out so well last year was he jumped from 40 defensive stops per season the last 3 years to 60 last year. So not trying to dunk on him. Still think he's going to be very good in both phases and a stud here. I think he's right around the 10th best linebacker in the NFL, give or take a spot or two. But then you got Frankie Louvu next to him. Again, tough player to kind of analyze because he's all over the damn place. The best thing I can really say to put into picture what he does is he's just going to see ball, hit ball. Sometimes that comes with a lack of run discipline. Sometimes it puts him out of position in coverage against play action, but it also leads to a bunch of disruptive plays in the backfield, flying sideline to sideline. He'll get off blocks. That's not an issue for me. He can shed blocks. And it's, again, going to be an impact as a pass rusher. He is just a chess piece. Giro Evero is going to have a ton of fun moving him around. He is just an overall impact on this defense. Great job by the scouts in place here, the pro scouts, to bring him in from the Jets because he had started to show a lot of these flashes for the Jets. They bring him in here. He becomes a bigger part of the defense as the year went on. He's heading into the second year of that contract now, and I think he's going to get paid a pretty nice chunk of change, if not before the season starts, as the season goes on, once they confirm that Evero can implement him into his scheme in the unique ways that you have to use Frankie Louvu's skill set. But really fun player, not really elite in any one department, and not a great traditional coverage linebacker, but yeah, just a really fun chess piece. And then Jeremy Chinn. We're going to talk a little bit more about Jeremy Chinn as a defensive back, but I'm just going to show you right here, an 83 coverage grade when he's at linebacker, super sticky on tight ends, got those safety zone feel instincts to buzz over the middle of the field. Got to stay healthy, but, he's another just unique special chess piece for this defense that elevates the group. As far as the depth goes, it's really not great depth, honestly. I don't mind Kamu Grugier-Hill. He's bounced around. He's been okay. He's a decent backup, good special teamer. But beyond that, Brandon Smith, they spent a 4th-round pick on him, completely raw athlete. I think with a lot of these just real raw, true developmental athletes, it's like the opposite of innocent until proven guilty. It's like guilty until proven innocent. We know the upside's there, but when they're on the football field, he can't break down a run. He can't be in the right place at the right time to save his life. So until he shows us that he can consistently play the linebacker position, I don't want to see him out there. You got a bunch of undrafted types after that. Aaron Mosby, Chandler Wooten, Ace Ellie. One guy I really like here is Bumper Poole. I could have seen him sneaking into the end of the draft. Physical guy. He was the real, kind of field general in the second level of that Arkansas defense as Drew Sanders just kind of ran around and made plays. But if there's going to be a Jack Sanborn of this year's undrafted free agent pool, I think it's going to be Bumper Poole out of Arkansas. But yeah, really fun linebacking group. Again, they rank 8th in linebacker coverage and 11th in linebacker run defense. But our last position group here is the secondary. And to be honest, I was a little bit lower on this secondary after reviewing the film and preparing for this episode, to the point that I actually lowered their DB coverage grade. You'll see in the description below that all of the grades you see are, subject to change because I am going to review the film for a lot of these teams. And sitting there looking at this thing, I love the safety group. We'll talk about them. But, I was like, okay, J.C. Horn's film, there's a lot of hype based on how he played last year. He made some plays. Still a long way to go for me to feel like J.C. Horn is a dominant lockdown number one corner. Dante Jackson has missed 49% of his snaps over the last 3 years. Didn't really consider that when I put the initial grade together. He's a huge health concern. And CJ Henderson just has not developed a lick since he came into the league, and there's really no cornerback depth at all. So I think I originally had them like 18th or something for DB coverage, and I actually lowered them. So just a reminder that sometimes these rankings do slide a little bit as I do more research and collect more information. And while we're on that topic, I will post my final spreadsheet for all of the rankings on my Patreon when all of this is done. So if you want to gear up to get access to that and support my channel, that is patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy. But anyway, let's get back into it. They rank 25th, and I do love J.C. Horn. I do. I think he's maybe a hint overrated by Panthers fans. I've seen them try to rank him inside the top 10, and when I've pointed out that, yeah, they probably should have drafted Pat Surtain over him, which I said on draft night, I've held to this day. And some Panthers fans will say, we're happy with J.C. Horn because we think he's just as good as Pat Surtain. And I'm like, you are insane. J.C. Horn has shown a ton of promise. He hasn't played a ton to this point in his first 2 years. He's had injury concerns that have followed him back to college as well. So he's got to stay healthy. And the other thing is, I think he just needs to be more consistent in coverage. Like, I love a lot of the stuff he does. I love the way he triggers downfield, whether he's playing top-down coverage, which will apply in this quarters heavy or off cover 3 zone coverage heavy defense. It'll apply there. Anytime he's blowing up a pass to the flat or a screen pass or helping against the run, I love his physicality. I love his physicality in the catch point as well when he is in position to make plays. Like, there really is a lot to like about J.C. Horn. I'm just trying to put a little bit of pump the brakes out there on him because I've seen some pretty crazy high takes on just kind of where he lies around the league, and I just don't think he's quite there yet. But definitely, as long as he can stay healthy and get out there more and continue to get those live reps, the arrow is pointing up. But let's not act like he's some lockdown cover corner either. Like, he is a risk taker. The reaction time when he's riding a guy's hip pocket is pretty good, but he can leave a little bit too much space between him and his intended receiver. So there is just room for him to continue to prove out. The future is still very bright for him, but I would not say he is a star corner yet based on my review of his film from his rookie season, because he tore his ACL in his rookie year. But beyond that, I mentioned Dante Jackson, just like talented player, can make some plays on the ball, really athletic guy. It's just reliability is not close to the first word, I would say, when it comes to Dante Jackson, whether that's when he's on the field or as far as his ability to be on the field. He's been hurt every year. Like I said, he's missed 49% of his available snaps over the last 3 years, was like 60% missed last year. And then when he's on the field, he's that risk taker. He wants to jump routes out of zone coverage. He tries to bait guys in man coverage. If he gets a pick, he's got insane athletic ability. We've seen some really high-end pick sixes from him and some high-end coverage snaps and all that, but he's just not a reliable option. And they're paying him to be a number one corner, and that's held this defense back at times. He's also not a good run defender. You don't love when you have to play him in the slot, but a lot of times you do have to play him in the slot. So I don't hate Dante Jackson. Honestly, I'm probably higher on him still than a lot of Panthers fans that are just done with Dante Jackson, but he's their number 2 option right now, and that's just not a great route. And then CJ Henderson, he's not going to be a full-time starter because of the amount of 3 safety packages they play here, but once Dante Jackson gets hurt, you got to put him out there, and that's exactly what we saw last year, and he was burnt toast. I've kind of had to eat my words a little bit Jags fans, I'll give you credit. You know, when the Panthers traded a third-round pick and Dan Arnold for C.J. Henderson, I was like, that is just highway robbery from the Panthers. But, dude, the Jags knew. They knew that this guy, I don't know what it is. He has all the physical talent in the world, but he can't react to a route. He can't play zone coverage. He's out of position constantly. There's going to be some highlight coverage plays in there, but I am not counting on C.J. Henderson to develop into anything close to his upside that existed once upon a time when they spent the Jags spent like the 8th overall pick on him. He's not a great run defender. I'm kind of out on C.J. Henderson until he proves otherwise, and I'm not optimistic about the amount of playing time that he's going to get this year. And it's not like they have great options behind them. They have a couple of bigger-bodied, later-round draft picks over the last couple of years. Keith Taylor, Stanley Thomas Oliver. I don't hate those players as backups, but if you have to start them, I don't feel good about it. Journeyman veteran and Greg Mabin. Some other undrafted types, including one that I do like in Rajon Wright. Liked his tape out of Oregon State. Reminded me a lot of Rasul Douglas as a guy that doesn't have great long speed, not the best athlete, but he's got length and a really good feel in off-zone coverage. I was really surprised the Buffalo Bills drafted his teammate, and Rajon went undrafted. I thought Rajon was the better of the two corners. I can't remember the name of the guy that the Bills drafted, but anyway, I think Rajon Wright actually has a chance to be this team's third best corner, like better than C.J. Henderson. I know he went undrafted, but it's not the craziest thing in a similar style scheme here where they're going to play a lot of off-zone defense. It's not the craziest thing to expect that Rajon Wright could be a player here, so we'll keep an eye on him. But yeah, I am worried about this group of corners. I think J.C. Horn will be fine, though he's a risk taker and he can be out of position at times. If Dante Jackson can stay healthy, you could do worse, but he's just shown us that that's not going to happen. And then I just get worried. So that's where I had to drop these guys. I do like the safety group quite a bit, and nothing's changed there. And it is very much worth noting that this is going to be a 3-safety defense the wide majority of the time because of how they're going to be able to be flexible with Jeremy Chinn. And Jeremy Chinn played almost all of his snaps last year as either a slot corner or as a linebacker, and I don't think that changes. In fact, I think their base defense is going to be Jeremy Chinn as the slot corner / nickel corner. It's very much what Kyle Hamilton did for the Ravens last year. It's what the Cardinals are going to do in a similar style defense this year with Isaiah Simmons. So he can absolutely do that. And usually the only concern with a, quote unquote stiffer, even though I don't think Jeremy Chinn is that stiff, I think he's like slightly below average for a true slot corner as far as ability to flip his hips and play man coverage. But the concern with a guy like that is, well, can he man up on a great route runner out of the slot? And they won't ask him to do that necessarily because once they get into drop back passing situations, he's being moved around and used in the right spot. So he's just a coverage asset. When he gets matched up on tight ends, he's really freaking good at that. He can cover the flat. He's got great speed, and he's a really explosive, big-bodied run defender as well. He's had his inconsistencies there, some missed tackles. He'll get flushed out of the run game occasionally because they do ask him to play linebacker a lot of the times, and he's just not a linebacker. So if you ask him to do linebacker things, you're going to see some ugly snaps there. But playing as that sort of Cam Chancellor, kind of quasi slot corner, linebacker, strong safety role, really like Jeremy Chinn there. If he can stay healthy, I think he can continue to, ascend the ranks as far as how he's perceived around the league. But even for what he is right now, he's a very good player. And then they bring in Von Bell to be a much more reliable, true safety than what they had last year in Miles Hartsfield, who again played 812 snaps last year. They had, between Jeremy Chinn, Xavier Woods, and Hartsfield, they had, let's see, about 2,500 snaps there between those three players. So again, I'm expecting similar usage from Ejiro Evero and for this to be a true 3-safety defense. And Obviously, going from Hartsfield to Von Bell, who's been the perfect chess piece for the Bengals defense as a complete rotational safety. Not rotational in the sense of he's on and off the field, rotational in the sense of, one play is playing in the box, one play is playing the post, the next play is, doing quarters. Like, they can do a lot of different things from Von Bell, and they can do a lot of different things with Xavier Woods, who's just he's Von Bell with the dials turned down about 5%. But both these guys are very versatile, can wear every single different hat. All of them reliable run defenders. All of them can man up tight ends, Von Bell manning up a slot receiver, I'd be a little bit worried. I think Xavier Woods a little bit more athletic to do some of that stuff. And when they go to cover 3, I think Xavier Woods is going to be the free safety, with Von Bell as the strong safety and Jeremy Chin doing his dime linebacker stuff. But yeah, the usage is going to be very fascinating. I know for a lot of people, it's difficult to wrap your minds around like a true 3 safety defense, but that's what this is. And if Dante Jackson can stay healthy, it's a very good secondary that will probably outperform that 20th ranking, but I don't think you can count on Dante Jackson staying healthy. And I think after that, you're going to run into some issues as far as what cornerbacks you're bringing out there on the field. Because no matter how creative you are with your safety room, ultimately, smart offenses are going to pick on bad corners, and they're almost inevitably going to have to field bad corners here, which is not ideal. So the rest of your safety depth here is still really freaking good. It's crazy how many safeties they have here. You got Eric Rowe, who they bring in from Miami, can still play, though he's on the other side of 30 now, and his coverage has dropped off a little bit. But he's a poor man's Von Bell, a poor man's Jeremy Chin, really. He's kind of the Jeremy Chin backup, because that's what he's done a lot of in Miami. Sam Franklin, versatile, special teamer type. He's played a lot for this team. He likes to run and hit. I think he still makes the team because of what he's going to bring to that side of the ball. But they also draft Jamie Robinson, who, by the way, might be an option as a slot corner, which I wouldn't hate putting Jamie Robinson out there as a slot. I just have never seen a high upside in Jamie Robinson's game, but he's really quick. He's really instinctive. He's a very smart football player. In the 5th round, totally fine with them bringing him in and just, providing defensive back depth. So there's your secondary. Again, I was a little bit underwhelmed by this group, even if it has some very good players and reasons to be excited about it. So rounding out this defense, they end up ranking 16th. Super balanced unit. Really no true weaknesses other than that defensive back depth. But again, they're going to shelter that in really creative ways to the point where it shouldn't be too big of an issue. They rank a little bit higher in run defense, 14th, than they do in pass defense, 20th. But I see a group that, with the coaching of Ejiro Evero, is going to really put together creative game plans. They're going to ride a nice middle line. I don't see this really having the upside to be a dominant defense, but I don't see this being a group that's getting lit up for 28, 35 points every week. I think it's going to be a very solid 20 to 24 points a game, keeping them in the game and giving Bryce Young a chance to win every single week. And that isn't something we've been able to say about a ton of these defenses so far in the series. So to tie a ribbon on all of this, not just a balanced defense, but a very balanced team in general. I think the offense, very balanced. I think they'll have a solid run game, a solid passing game, be able to attack teams based on their weaknesses that week. I think the special teams is very good. Eddie Pinheiro is settled in as a good kicker. They have a great punter in Johnny Hecker. Their coverage unit was excellent last year. Expecting more of that with Frank Wright coming in. But at the same time, as I pull up their strengths and weaknesses, this chart looks nothing like any team we've done so far. They have one true strength, and that strength was just team balance and a lack of true weaknesses. That points to a lack of upside for this Panthers team, right? But in the worst division in the league and the worst conference in the league, the worst of the two conferences, being a consistent, high floor, streamlined team and winning 9 or 10 games, it's probably going to get you in the playoffs, And definitely is why they rank 20th. And as you look at their weaknesses, it's a lack of elite playmakers on offense. That group of receivers isn't going to wow anybody, but I think they'll still get the job done as long as Bryce Young is the quarterback I'm expecting him to be and the play calling to be as good as I think it's going to be here. And then cornerback depth. So you got to find a way to keep Dante Jackson healthy. But even then, I've talked about how they're going to shelter some of that stuff with the 3 safety defenses. And, Ejiro Evero still had, what were the Broncos, 16th defensively last year? And they still had to trot out Isang Bassi and Damari Mathis. And, they had their issues in Denver, and Evero worked around it with less talent than he has here. So I'm expecting a similar result and obviously rank them 16th defensively for a reason. So let's look at their schedule. What are my final expectations for this Panthers team? Well, it really shouldn't come as a surprise that I think this is a team that can get over their Vegas over-under of 7.5 wins. And especially when you look at that division odds, you can get them as high as plus 375. That's like 4-1 odds. In some weird, crazy world where I bet on sports, which definitely isn't a world that's close to our current existence, like, I definitely didn't yesterday put money on them to win the division at 4-1. No, that'd be crazy. No, of course, I would suggest betting 4-1 odds on a team that I think has the best chance at winning this division. I see a really high floor. I think they'll win 8 to 10 games. And unless I'm completely wrong about Bryce Young, which is obviously possible, I feel very good that this is a balanced, good team that can win the worst division in the NFL. You look at their schedule, it does, like, the start to their schedule is tough. I will say that. And you might make this bet, and then through 6 weeks, you're like, damn it, TFG, this is not looking good. So just be patient. They have 4 out of the first 6 games are on the road. 1 at Seattle, at Detroit, at Miami. Those are going to be really tough games for them. They have to host Minnesota. They have to go to Atlanta week 1. That's not going to be easy. Like, they're going to be tested physically against that team. There might be some early learning curves with the new staff and the rookie quarterback. But I love the week 7 bye to recoup after that stretch. And then you get Houston at home, Indy at home, at Chicago against what could be the worst defense in the NFL to get back on the right track. A couple of tougher games there with Dallas and Tennessee, and then it lightens up. You got Tampa, New Orleans, Atlanta, Green Bay. You got to go to Jacksonville, but then you wrap up with Tampa Bay at home. So a team that I could see like last year's Detroit Lions, where a little bit of a slow start, but things pick up. They end up winning 6 of their last 8 games and make a late push for this division. So that's definitely the play if I'm betting this, would be the division odds, because their Vegas over-under is 7.5. That's going to pay like even money to get to 8 wins. Well, I think it's only going to take 9 or 10 to win this division, and that's 3 or 4 times the payout. So that would definitely be my gambling advice on this Panthers team that I'm definitely higher on. Excited to get your feedback on the deep dive here. What do you think of my analysis of this Panthers team? Am I crazy for ranking them as the best team in the NFC South, or are you on board? Did I convince you to be on board here? Going to be interesting either way to see how this division plays out now that all 4 of these teams have been covered before we even get into the teens of these rankings. This division's booty cheeks. There's no way around it. But thank you so much for watching. Really hope you guys enjoyed. Please do hit that like button on the way out. Make sure you're subscribed. We'll see you for the next one. Peace out.